Writers in Training. I'm Shannon, writing under the pen name SD Huston, and author of Blood of the Lily and Soul of a Rose. Some of you may or may not know, but I've created the first 2 covers in my Clash of Goddesses series. I know, you shouldn't do this is what they say. Leave it to the professionals. I did hire a professional for my first book cover. I liked it fine, but then for my second book, which I was writing for a Camp NaNoWriMo project, I wanted to create a placeholder cover. I ended up liking that cover so much more. So I took a stab at creating my first book cover, and that's the story with how I fell into making my own book covers, which I did before I had my YouTube channel. For my third and final book in the Clash of Goddesses series, I still had to make my cover. This time, I screen recorded my entire process. It took 7 hours and 15 minutes to create it, but I've sped up the video for you guys here. So here is me making my cover. I'll start by talking about the process in creating the book, and then I'll do a reading of the first chapter in my book, Tears of the Marigold. First, I researched Marigold, naturally found in Ireland. After snagging a couple names, I went to Pixabay, where I can find royalty-free, totally-free pictures without required attribution. The first marigold I searched for was the Marsh Marigold. Once I found a picture I liked, I downloaded it and then pasted it into PowerPoint, where I cropped the photo to the picture part that I wanted. And then I removed the background so that I could get just the flower. I don't know the process professional cover designers follow, but I've had no training, so I just use the tools I'm comfortable with and I know how to use. Once I have the image as cleaned up as possible, I paste it as a new layer into the free editing software GIMP. I already have the base for the book cover, which is exactly the same one I use for all of my books. The base includes a green watercolor background with the addition of Celtic symbols. The green watercolor background was the one thing I kept from the cover designer I had hired. I added the symbols. With the flower, I now want to clean up the edges by erasing around the petals. Then I resize the flower and move it into the bottom right corner. I use the same corner to include the named flowers for the first 2 books. Blood of the Lily has a Kerry lily, a rare flower found only in Kerry, Ireland, and Kerry is where all of my female protagonists were born and raised. And of course, I have a rose for Soul of a Rose. Once I've placed the flower, I go look for other parts to add, including greenery and other flowers. One thing I do for all the covers was include specific colors to represent the girls of my books. White for Lily's white lilies, red for Rose's red roses, and yellow for Marigold's yellow marigolds. So every cover includes greenery along with white, yellow, and red flowers. These are marigold corns. I actually couldn't find many marigolds in Ireland, so I only had a few to choose from. To search for the flowers naturally found in Ireland, I used the website wildflowersofireland.net, which actually allows me to search for flowers by color, which was great since I wanted to include those specific colored flowers for all of the covers. Next, I looked for red flowers in Ireland. I really like the Scarlet Pimpernel, but I couldn't find a free picture with the right intensity I saw on some of the other websites where I would have to have paid for the picture. So I took the one free picture and cut it out and cleaned it up. Then I worked on changing the color through changing the color temperature and hue saturation. I kept double checking it with the photo on Flickr until it was near enough the same color. Now I thought about having some type of red plant in the top right corner to balance out the covers across the series. Blood of the Lily has a red plant in the top left corner. This is a fuchsia, which I thought was interesting looking, but I thought it might not work as the red has a bit of a purple undertone, but I wanted to try it out to get a red plant in the cover and have something different. I spent a lot of time cleaning this up, making a duplicate of it, and then arranging them. As I'm doing all of this, I know nothing is set in stone. I'm just trying out different things. Next, I moved on to the top left corner, which I knew I wanted a white flowering plant. I found this in the hawthorn. I placed it where I think it will go, and I made a duplicate of it as well. At this point, I have the initial setup of my corners, so I bring in my feathers to see where to place them. I have 3 feathers on each of the covers, which stand in for certain people in the books. The peacock feather represents the Greek queen of the gods, Hera. Although she is not a major character in either the first or the third book, albeit she has appearances, she is one external factor that has a major impact on all of the girls' lives. When it comes to placement of the feathers, I tried to do something different than I did with the other covers. I also consider how it looks with the flowers. Next, I bring in the eagle feather, which represents Agathon, the Greek brother of Quintus, and the once lover of Hera. Agathon never has a viewpoint in the books, and in fact spends most of his time as an eagle, but his very existence creates the motivations for many of the characters' actions. Last is the raven Raven Feather, which represents the Morrigan. Without her, the main characters Lily, Rose, and Marigold would have continued to lead normal lives. Every single action she took had negative consequences for the girls. Without the Morrigan, the events of these books would have never happened as they did. Okay, with the basic greenery, flowers, and feathers in place, I'm seeing where I want to fill in with more flowers. So I go back to searching, downloading, cropping, cleaning up, resizing, and placing more pictures. At this point, I have my basic layout, and I would still need to add all of my lettering, but you know what? I don't like it. So I stopped here for today. I didn't come back until 2 days later, so I could mull it over a bit. One thing I know I didn't like is that red fuchsia at the top right corner. So I go searching again for a red plant to put there. This is also the hawthorn tree with the red berries. I like how full the foliage is, so I decided to try this one. But as I'm looking at the top right corner, I'm still not happy. Maybe it's the feathers, so I play around with their placement again. But the biggest issue is that I have the same exact plant in the top left corner of Blood of the Lily. I could view it as having like bookends, but since I don't really duplicate the bigger plants between the book covers, I decide against it and go looking again. This is the Irish yew tree. At first, I'm not sure about this as I have a lot to clean up, and I've already spent time on 2 other plants. But as I'm not happy with the other ones, I have no choice but to move forward. Once I have a basic cleanup, it's not done. I feel that I need more of the red berries, so I go find another picture, clean it up, and duplicate it on the cover. Next, I'm not really in love with the Scarlet Pimpernel, so I go searching for other red flowers. And I'm drawn to the red poppies. I find a couple different pictures and envision what they'll look like meshed together. I'm excited for the vision in my head as I crop the pictures, clean them up, and work on sizing and placing them in the bottom left corner. I also feel I need some different greenery to add to the bottom left corner, so I find some ivy. Note that I think the ivy is not very pretty as is, even after cleaning it up, but I think it's the color tone, which I'll work on later. After duplicating the picture a couple of times and erasing parts of the duplicates so that they don't look exactly alike, I integrate them with the other parts in the corner. Overall, I'm happy with the elements I've chosen. Many of them need to be resized and manipulated still. I also need to work on the hue and saturation of certain pieces. Then I'll add the lettering and see how it all works together. As I work on the rest of this, please enjoy the first chapter of this book. Tears of the Marigold, Chapter 1. For the first time in a year, Marigold took a breath. Everything was dark because she couldn't get her eyes to open, but the scent of fresh flowers filled the space around her. Beneath her, a soft bed cradled her unresponsive body. A low rumbling groaned in her ears, and her body rocked slightly as the world trembled outside her closed eyes. Then it settled. She tried once more to flutter her eyes open, or even wiggle her fingers, but nothing moved. It had been so long since she had to use her body. She moaned. A baby whimpered. The sound confused her. Where am I? She couldn't remember anything beyond the black void she saw in her mind. Hands brushed against her face. They felt familiar. Warm, loving caresses. An image floated before her inner eye. A proud profile, shoulder-length blonde hair, eyes the color of the sky. Love filled her at the sight of the man in her mind. Fingers tucked her hair behind an ear. Then an arm slid along her shoulders, lifting her to slip pillows at her back, setting her at an incline. Marigold. The low voice shook her. It tickled distant memories that fought to remain hidden. Again she tried to open her eyes, eyelids fluttering against her cheeks. Light filtered through her hazy vision and pierced the black void. A silhouette leaned toward her. The image wavered as a headache took root in her temples. Shadowy fingers worked over her chest, and she closed her eyes with a sigh. Take it easy, my sweet. Warm breath caressed her face. The rich, smoky scent of his exhalation and closeness awakened more begrudging memories and aroused her. He was Crum Crua, her husband, and an ancient god of ire, a god of darkness, death, and fertility, and she loved him to the core of her being. Sucking sounds followed a slight tug at one of her nipples. Her eyes fluttered open again. This time images resolved into crisper lines, and she worked to make sense of the colorfulness that nearly blinded her. She squinted. Finally, she recognized the large bed and the room as hers, her chambers at Pala no Fahath, the palace of the giant. But memories were slow at returning. She couldn't recall the day before. Where have I been? Crum sat next to her on the bed, with one hand holding something against her breast. He was dressed in expensive silks, his shirt snowy white, his trousers in earth tones, with a deep green mantle over his shoulders. A brooch, a golden snake with a pearl for its one eye, pinned the mantle at his shoulder. His light-colored eyes focused on her face as he spoke in a near whisper. "You're back." She willed a smile, so happy at hearing his voice. Love rushed to fill her like a river breaking free of a dam. Ever so slowly, willing her muscles to cooperate, she tilted her head down to peer at the wrapped bundle on her chest. Immediately, she wanted to raise her arms to hold the sweet child latched at her breast, but her body failed, her arms barely twitching. A tiny baby fist rose above tight blankets. This was her first glimpse of her daughter. Her daughter? How had I known the baby was a girl? She couldn't recall. Red hair with a hint of gold curled around the tiny scrunched face. 2 fans of blonde lashes spread across plump cheeks. A small rosy mouth sucked noisily, surprising Marigold with the power of each tug. A rush of warmth flowed down her breast. The ease at which her breast milk release suggested she had been breastfeeding her daughter longer than just this day, and she worried about her memory loss. With wide eyes, her neck feeling stronger, she glanced back up to her husband. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came. He cupped her cheek with his free hand. "We have much to talk about, but first you need to gain your strength." Where his fingers brushed against her bare skin, heat traveled through her, bringing to focus memories of the sweet embraces and sweaty nights she shared with him. But a lingering threat over those memories hinted at something darker. She frowned, knowing it was important. The baby released her nipple, tiny eyes closed. With movements that spoke of practice, Kroom settled the sleeping baby next to her on the bed and tugged her white nightdress back over her breasts, lacing the top. While his fingers worked the ties, Marigold studied him. What do I have to fear? She didn't understand what her vague memories tried to warn. All she knew was that she loved him. As each moment passed, a little vigor came back to her. She finally spoke, although her words sounded rusty to her ears. "I'm so happy to see you." His small smile turned down at the corners of his mouth, as if he held back something. Once he finished her laces, he looked up at her. "What do you remember?" She blinked. "Just feelings. I remember my love for you." She frowned. "Where have I been?" "Try, Marigold. Think deep." She closed her eyes, willing the fogginess to lift from her mind. The ocean suddenly sprang up in her thoughts, the waters tumbling over her. "You saved me from drowning." Burgeoning love as she came to know Kroom. Passion. Heat suffused her body, making her warm. When she opened her eyes to look at him again, her ardor cooled at the hard lines etching his face, his intense stare unblinking. "What else?" She shook her head. "I don't remember." His large hands slid up her arms to her shoulders. Dark shadows in the corners of the room grew larger as tendrils of fog rolled down the walls. "I need you to remember." She closed her eyes again, searching through the emptiness of her mind. What does he want to know? His image filled all her thoughts, his smile, his laughing eyes, his hands on her body. But threat lingered as she pushed past the passionate nights. Kroom's black fog had gathered before. He'd held her, close to his body, murmuring sweet words, and then piercing pain had struck every part of her body, lancing all through her. Everything was dark afterward. She opened her eyes. The tiniest niggle of fear wormed into her heart. "I can't remember much." His fingers bit into her skin. "Did Dawn Firna kidnap you?" Dawn Firna? The name recalled new memories. A dismal fortress in the land of the dead. Nothing but gray grass and only a single river. Another god, one who had loved her. Did he kidnap me? She blinked away his image, that of a thin man with a narrow sunken face the color of white bone. Kroom still waited for her answer, so she cleared her throat. "I don't think so." Abruptly he pulled away from her to pace the room with long, quick strides. One quick hand brushed through his blonde hair. Fog rolled along the walls and touched the carpeted floors. Then he came back to her, kneeling on the carpet beside her on the bed. All the anger was gone. Instead, the corner of his eyes turned down as if he were sad. "Please, I need to know." Everything was so confusing. "Need to know what?" He grasped her hand, his grip tight, almost painful. Black fog reached him and wrapped around his feet. I need to know if you left me on purpose. I don't... Before she could finish, a shock of lightning spread through her. This was the previous pain she had felt, but weaker than before. Still, her head flung against the wooden headboard and her eyes rolled back. Flashes of color exploded behind her closed eyes. Memories crashed over her and a rush in her head pounded. The shock lasted only seconds, leaving her more drained than she had already been. The room was quiet. She barely even heard Kroom's breath or the sleeping baby against her hip. Only her breathing echoed loud in her ears. Groaning, she brought her head down and opened her eyes. Kroom stared intently at her, his hand still holding hers. Some of her thoughts unwrinkled, although most still made no sense, but she knew one thing. Kroom was more than just her dark god. Once he had told her that he had had 3 names. One name held little consequence for most, and that was the name he'd given her, Kroom Krua, an old god who had nearly vanished from people's consciousness. He tugged her hand, eyebrows raising. You have another name. Yes, he said. Bathan. Before they'd married, he had told her his second name, one that came with a powerful position and made her queen. He was the warrior of the well and the king of Tirfalhin, an otherworld realm known as the land under the wave. But his second name shouldn't cause the fear warming in her heart. She swallowed hard as she tried to tease out the cause of her panic. What else, Marigold? Tears filled her eyes. She didn't want to remember, she was sure. The scent of fresh flowers still permeated the air, laying heavy between them. Surely she had nothing to fear from her husband. He knows my love of flowers. As black fog curled around Kroom's feet once more, her lips froze in place. Great Mother Goddess Danu, she loved this god, but something told her she couldn't. When the shock lanced through her body again, the whole world went black. So that's how I designed the cover. Here is the paperback version of Tears of the Marigold, and I'm so very happy with how it turned out. But I think I'm still not in love with it because my 2 least favorite colors are yellow and green. My favorite book cover still happens to be the first one I did for Soul of a Rose, which is actually the second book in the series. However, one thing that I do love about all 3 covers is how they look together. They seem to flow together from one book to the next. And you can now pre-order the ebook for Tears of the Marigold for 99 cents. It publishes on June 6th, less than 2 weeks away, and during its launch, the ebook for Blood of the Lily will be free, and the ebook for Soul of a Rose will be on sale for 99 cents. So you can grab the whole series with good discounts if you haven't already. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and happy writing.